Welcome to Scary Stories NYC. I'm your old pal Bigfoot. Today we've got two all-new stories of people who say they've seen Dogman on their property and are now trying to get some photographic or video evidence of the presence of these creatures in their areas. But before we get to both of those creepy stories, which feature multiple Dogman sightings, I'm very excited to get to announce that today's episode is executive produced by Dave Rabbit. Not Roger Rabbit, but we've got Dave. Of all the rabbits, Dave's our fave. On the Rock of Eternity, we engrave a thank you to the rabbit known as Dave. Thank you, Dave Rabbit. We couldn't do it without you and our other wonderful executive producers. Thanks to all of you. If you want to be a Scary Stories executive producer like Dave the Rave, just join our very affordable paid subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Or do it how Dave did it by clicking the join link underneath this video. Either way, you get access to over 9 hours of scary Dogman stories too wild to ever run on this channel, and a new secret uncensored story each week at peterbernard.com. Oh, I wanted to say I hardly ever watch TV shows made after 2015, but I caught something that I think is running on AMC or Shudder, or maybe both of them. It's a new series version of the old Creepshow movie. Even though they didn't have George Romero or Stephen King, I thought they really captured the spirit of the original. The reason I'm bringing it up here is because the first episode I saw had 3 different kinds of werewolves in it. Or maybe 4. There was one that looked like dog soldiers, one that looked like American Werewolf in London, and one that looked like your old school Lon Chaney or a Paul Naschy kind of wolfman. I think you guys who like horror with a sense of humor might like that new series version of Creepshow. It's nothing true or real. It's supposed to be a comic book come to life, but I think some of you might dig it anyway, so I wanted to tell you about it. Speaking of mythical things coming to life, that's exactly what our first story submitter claims he witnessed. There were 3 alleged witnesses, and each of their stories are a bit different, as you'll learn in this tale we call The Dogman That Walked Down the Stone Path. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I have a story for you that happened to me, my wife, and her best friend. It involves an upright walking canine figure that my wife thinks is a real animal, but her friend insists was a magical or super scientific manifestation or entity. I'll start by telling you what I saw, then explain what the others told me. Then I'll tell you what I've started to do about it. Let's call my wife Bertha and her friend Melba just for fun. They would hate those names if they heard this, but I have no plans of telling them that I wrote you, and I don't think they ever venture on this side of YouTube, no offense. The two of them had been waiting to hang out together for a long time, and this was their first opportunity to hang out without having those stupid face masks on. What day was that? Friday? I forget, but whatever day they opened the bars and whatnot, my wife and her friend were hanging out downstairs on the ground floor in my home. I was upstairs doing my own thing, when I happened to look out the window and see something completely unexpected and surreal. I noticed a figure in silhouette walking along the stone pathway my wife had put in herself a couple of years back. The path leads from the backyard around to the side of our house by the windows and connects with a pre-existing path leading to our front door. My initial thought was that possibly we were being visited by one of our neighbors who lived on the other side of the woods. Our backyard is defined by the forest surrounding the property, and it's a fairly large bit of woods. If you walk straight through, though, you can reach the backyard of another home in only about 8 or 10 minutes. I know this because Bertha and I accidentally did just that soon after moving in years ago. If you enter those woods, then make either a left or a right, though, you'll be able to continue walking under the canopy of those trees for probably hours, maybe days. So, although it's a short walk to cross it right in this area, It's connected on either side to much larger woodlands and some protected wild areas here in Wisconsin. As the silhouetted figure walked forward and was beginning to be lit by both our house lights and the yard lights, I felt a sharp, painful clutching feeling in my chest, and fear shot through me. Panic, maybe. The ever more visible figure was like something out of a nightmare. It looked like some kind of a dog that had been taken apart and put back together to walk upright. It was literally an upright walking canine. It took long, sure, confident strides, and it looked as though it had always walked this way. Yet at the same time, it also looked like some kind of special effects puppet animation. Stop motion, I mean. It looked like a tall, dark, dog-headed monster man from a Ray Harryhausen movie, and it was walking along on my wife's stone pathway. Everything I can think to say about it sounds like a cliche once I write it down or say it. It was so impossible. And yet, there it was. And yes, the eyes did glow, which also looked like a special effect. They did not glow like cat eyes in a flash photo. They glowed like lightning bugs that stayed on all the time. But the coloring was less greenish than fireflies. These eyes glowed a kind of a golden color. The creature seemed to have seen something that interested it, and it wandered off the path onto the grass, approaching my house. I heard Bertha and Melba scream downstairs, and I heard thumping noises, so I freaked out and I ran downstairs as fast as I could. When I reached the scene, I saw the chair my wife had been sitting on knocked over backward and sideways, and I saw my wife on her knees peeking out the bottom of the window. Melba was standing next to her with her hands on Bertha's shoulders. I couldn't see anything out the window past them, and my first question was, "Is it still there?" My wife, continuing to look outside while answering, said, "I think it ran away after I screamed. I fell off my chair. Then when I got up, it was already gone." Melba immediately gave a different account of what had just occurred. "No, it didn't run off," she said. We both looked at her, alarmed. "Do you mean it's still here?" I asked. Melba looked confused, as though she hadn't considered the question already. I don't know, maybe it is," she told us, then elaborated. "All I know is that when we screamed and Bertha did the tilt-a-whirl, I saw that thing disappear." We quizzed her at some length, and when she said disappear, it turned out she meant just exactly that. According to my wife's friend, when Bertha fell over, the Dogman blinked out of existence. He didn't run away. He didn't walk away. He didn't fade away. He was just there 1 second and was not there the next. Melba said she had assumed it had teleported to another place, but when I pressed her about the possibility that the Dogman was still present, she suddenly realized it might have made itself invisible instead of teleporting. Maybe it hadn't gone anywhere. Maybe it was still watching us. We pulled all the shades shut, and the three of us ended up driving over to Melba's house to spend the night. When I got up Saturday or Sunday, I drove into the sporting goods shop, which is newly reopened, and got myself some game cameras or trap cameras or whatever you call them. I set them up on trees in the woods behind the house, sort of randomly. Then I put a couple on the side of the house near the pathway we had seen the creature on. I hung them a little bit over 6 feet tall, and I got the idea that I thought was brilliant of putting a piece of bacon hanging over the camera to try to attract the Dogman. I was hoping I could get a full close-up shot of his face if he came over to smell the bacon, you know? I was so proud of this idea, but my wife told me I was an idiot. She thinks that what she saw was a real animal, like a bear or a large wolf sort of mixed together, but she says she never expects it to come back this way ever again. She says when she saw the Dogman out that window, it was looking at her in a curious and confused way, not an angry way. To her, that meant it had wandered into our part of town by accident. After being screamed at, she felt he would be scared off of this part of the world for life. And that was for the best for everyone, as he obviously belonged in the woods and not in our backyard. She felt I was a moron for trying to lure it back. "Leave well enough alone," she kept saying to me all weekend. I dropped the bacon idea already, but not because she said so. I dropped it because it attracted bugs which would set off the camera, and we got a lot of videos of bugs. Also, the cameras facing trees would get activated when winds would blow the leaves around, so I'm thinking I should rethink where I have them all hung. Like, maybe I should move them all up a lot higher and point them downward. It wouldn't give me the full-on close-up of a Dogman face that I was hoping for, but it might be out of the range of the Dogman's sight or smell. Some people think Dogman can sense motion-activated cameras and will avoid an area that contains them, but I've heard stories from guys in hunting blinds who had a Dogman walk or run right past them without sensing them there. So there does seem to be a range and a limit to their abilities. Maybe if the trap cameras are up high enough, like hanging out of the second-story windows in our house pointed downward, then possibly the legendary Dogman, known for being so difficult to photograph, might stumble right into camera range, and the world might finally have proof that this thing exists. Now, my wife's friend Melba still insists that the Dogman blinked out of existence or teleported or became invisible instantly. She says that if a trap camera went off, the Dogman would hear it happening and be able to blink out again before the camera could take a single picture or even start the video recording. I suppose her logic makes sense, but she's the only one of the three of us who actually saw the monster blink out. My wife and I reserve the right to be dubious about that. I mean, maybe it ducked under the window so quickly that it created the illusion it was going poof. I don't know, 'cause I wasn't there, but I sure wish I had gotten downstairs sooner. I really wonder if I would have seen the same thing as Melba saw, or what else I might have seen. If only we had a motion-activated camera running that night, we might have been able to prove that we saw the Dogman that walked down the stone path. Should we get cameras to deal with Dogman? Dear Scary Stories NYC, my wife and I have been hearing stories from our friends who live near us here in Pennsylvania, and they've been reporting seeing Dogman. It was a curious thing we laughed at primarily, but it got less funny over time. Since our friends have all been at home, they've been seeing these monsters, 5 or 6 foot tall, dog-headed, naked cavemen storming around on their property or nearby. Each story happened a little closer to where we live, and each one alarmed my wife a bit more. When she's alarmed, I'm alarmed, and if I'm not, she'll yell at me until I am. But this time, we both agreed that the idea of man-sized animals that eat people walking around in your neighborhood is strictly bad news. I became convinced it had to be a joke. It must be a joke, a practical joke that they were all playing on us. I became paranoid that all our friends were leaving us out of this funny joke, unless my wife was in on it too, and only pretending she wasn't. It got like that, tense, with me suspecting everyone of doing something, but I wasn't sure exactly what I was sure that they did. I don't know how much of this was exacerbated by us all being in lockdown, but we griped at each other for a while, my entire group of friends. None of them admitted that it was a joke, and in fact some of them seemed to get furiously angry at me for even suggesting it. I just didn't want to believe that it could be true, because if it was, then it would only be a matter of time until we saw the monster as well. I just did not want this to become my problem, because it was too much like something out of a horror movie, and not enough like something from real life. If you're going to cast me in a movie, please put me in a light comedy or a fantasy with a happy ending. Please do not stick me in a horror movie because people in horror movies rarely make wise decisions. And even the ones that survive at the end usually have to get all messy to do it. That's just not part of my vision for my own life. I have to admit, I was very shaken up by the idea of the Dogman. Just the idea of its existence in the area I had come to feel so comfortable and safe inside. And so, last week, the inevitable happened. We heard the howling first. I felt my eyes tear up. I felt my face flush warm. I began to prepare a speech in my head that I wanted to give my wife. I wanted to collect together fine-sounding and inspiring words that would create bravery out of fear. I wanted to give us an emotional moat of confidence that would keep any dogman out there from scaring us in our own home. I felt the excitement in my gut, knowing that I knew exactly what to say to my wife. She would understand how much I loved her, how much I wanted her safe, and how much I respected and cherished her brave outlook on the world. But then the Dogman came running out of the woods, a crazy look in its eyes, and we both saw it running toward our house. We screamed like little children and both ran upstairs, hiding in the back of my wife's walk-in closet on the floor by the far back. None of our friends had told us anything about the Dogman rushing their house. None of them talked about the Dogman seeing them and running toward them. We had never thought the Dogman might try to get in our home. We were just afraid of it lurking outside. Now, all bets were off, and we were afraid to come out of our hiding spot until the morning. That's just not a dignified way to spend an evening, and I never want that to happen again. Neither does my wife. She ordered thick curtains for all the windows. She says the solution to the problem is just to never look outside again for the rest of her life. To me, that isn't a solution. That's hiding from a solution. I have proposed that we get motion-activated trail cameras and put them up around the place. Maybe it will scare the creatures off like they say, or maybe we can actually get a photo or video of the monster if it decides to come give us a second visit. Part of how upsetting the last sighting was involved the horrible feeling that most people are never going to believe us if we tell them the truth about what we saw. Speaking of which, I don't recall if I gave you any specifics about the thing we saw. This was definitely 7 feet tall or taller, much taller than what our friends had told us they had seen. It had a big, broad chest. It had a very skinny abdomen. Its legs were shaped like massive pork chops, large and muscular at the top, going down to bony bottoms and massively padded back paws. It was pitch black all over, but the fur was smooth and very shiny. In spite of its darkness, you could make it out clearly in low light due to the intense shininess of the fur. Everything on this Dogman's head seemed to come to a point. The nose was pointy, the eyebrows on top of its eyes went up to points, its tall, thin ears came to furry points as well. The eyes were tilted slits glowing in the dark. It looked as much like a devil as it looked like a dog. It was a villain from a horror movie from top to bottom, and it wanted us scared. The incident might have lasted 30 seconds, but it may as well still be happening now. That's how upsetting it still is to me. Now, my friends have got me reading up about Skinwalker Ranch and watching that new TV show. The old story of how Bob Bigelow set up video cameras, but then somehow the cord to one of the cameras was disconnected a second before it would have videotaped something amazing. And the other camera trained on the first one showed that cord was somehow disconnected between 2 frames of video. In less than a second, something which did not show up on the video disconnected the cord. That story didn't just spook me, it bummed me out. If what we're dealing with here is something like that, then I don't suppose that we'll ever catch any Dogman evidence. And on top of that, I was hoping that the cameras might scare the Dogman away so that we can live in peace. But if that Skinwalker Ranch story is for real, and it sure seems to be, then the Dogman could continue living here, continue messing with us and all our neighbors, and if we try to photograph him, he can just do his magic to prevent that from happening. Somehow, I'm hoping that this all just deals with itself. We need to retake our communities and areas. We need to get past this crisis thing and get back out there. Once we're back present in our own communities, in the numbers we used to be, those Dogmen won't come around so much. They're just taking advantage of us being locked up, that's what I think. I don't want to let that thing scare us. But I squealed like a baby the first time I saw it. I might be even more pathetic if it came back. That's kind of why I'm hoping it doesn't. Although I guess capturing a clear photo or video of a real Dogman would be a life-changing event. I think I'd honestly rather have the monster just go away and never come back. So I leave the question in your lap then, dear viewer. What should my wife and I do? Should we get cameras to deal with the Dogman?
I shall return. Like last night's triple lupa, I shall return. I'll be back here May 23rd to help host our Memorial Day Military Dogman Stories. All stories alleged to have happened to military service people or veterans. I'm going to read one of the stories myself. You won't want to miss it. It should prove to be quite memorial.
And now, get ready for an all-new, completely uncensored, slightly bloody, and absolutely terrifying new Dogman story. Oh, wait. YouTube won't allow me to tell you stories like that on this channel. If you want to hear that, you're going to have to go to peterbernard.com and sign up for our paid subscribers club. You can choose any price you can afford for a 1-month subscription, and then every weekend, we tell you a story YouTube would never allow us to tell you on this channel. See you this Sunday for an all-new, very scary, completely uncensored Dogman story.
Come back for more scary stories.